At 6 o'clock in the morning, I got another shot, which seemed to have some effect. As I learned later, this shot was not Demerol. I was even able to eat a little toast and drink some coffee. When my wife came to see me later in the day, she told me that they were using a new treatment in my case. When I was up and walking around, a psychiatrist came to interview me. He was very tall. He had long legs and a heavy body shaped like a pear with a narrow end up. He smiled when he talked, and his voice was whiny. He was not effeminate. He simply had none of whatever it is that makes a man a man. This was Dr. Fredericks, head psychiatrist of the hospital. He asked the question they all ask. Why do you feel that you need narcotics, Mr. Lee? When you hear this question, you can be sure that the man who asks it knows nothing about junk. I needed to get out of bed in the morning, to shave and eat breakfast. I mean, psychically. I shrugged. Might as well give him his diagnosis so he will go. It's a good kick. Junk is not a good kick. The point of junk to a user is that it forms the habit. No one knows what junk is until he is junk sick. The doctor nodded. Psychopathic personality. He stood up. Suddenly, he moved his face into a smile that was obviously intended to be understanding and to dissolve my reticence. The smile took over and ended up an insane leer. He leaned forward and brought his smile close to my face. Is your sex life satisfactory, he asked. Do you and your wife have satisfactory relations? Oh, yes, I said, when I'm not on the junk. He straightened up. He did not like my answer at all. Well, I'll see you again. He blushed and lunged awkwardly for the door. He told my wife I had a very bad prognosis. I was feeling the shots less all the time, and after 8 days, I began to pass them up. When I had passed the shots for 24 hours, I decided it was time to leave. It was 5 o'clock in the afternoon when we left the hospital and took a cab to Canal Street. I went into a bar and drank 4 whiskey sodas and got a good lush kick. I was cured. As I walked across the porch of my house and opened the door, I had the feel of returning after a long absence. I was coming back to the point in time I left a year ago when I took that first joy bang with Pat. Pat came around as soon as he heard I was out. Said, I want to pick up. Just one wouldn't hurt any. He could get a good price on 10 or more. I said no. You don't need willpower to say no to junk when you are off. You don't want it. Besides, I was charged in state, and state junk raps pile up like any other felony. A few days later, I stopped by my lawyer's office to talk about the case and to ask whether I could leave the state. You're hot as a firecracker in this town, Ty told me. I have permission from the judge for you to leave the state, so you can go anytime you like. I might want to take a trip to Mexico, I said. Would that be okay? So long as you're back here when your case comes up, there are no restrictions on you. One client of mine went to Venezuela. So far as I know, he's still there. He didn't come back. As soon as I hit Mexico City, I started looking for junk. At least, I always had one eye open for it. One day, I was walking down San Juan Letran and passed a cafeteria that had colored tiles set in the stucco around the entrance and the floor was covered with the same tile. The cafeteria was unmistakably Near Eastern. As I walked by, someone came out of the cafeteria. He was a type character you see only on the fringes of a junk neighborhood. As the geologist looking for oil is guided by certain outcroppings of rock, so certain signs indicate the near presence of junk. Junk is often found adjacent to ambiguous or transitional districts. East 14th near 3rd in New York, Poydras and St. Charles in New Orleans, San Juan Letran in Mexico City. Stores selling artificial limbs, wig makers, dental mechanics, loft manufacturers of perfumes, pomades, novelties, essential oils. A point where dubious business enterprise touches Skid Row. There's a type person occasionally seen in these neighborhoods who has connections with junk, though he is neither a user nor a seller. But when you see him, the dowser wand twitches. Junk is close. His place of origin is Near East, probably Egypt. He has a long, straight nose. His lips are thin and purple-blue like the lips of a penis. The skin is tight and smooth over his face. He is basically obscene beyond any possible vile act or practice. He has the mark of a certain trade or occupation that no longer exists. If junk were gone from the earth, there might still be junkies standing around in junk neighborhoods, feeding the lack, vague and persistent, a pale ghost of junk sickness. So this man walks around in the place where he once exercised his obsolete and unthinkable trade. But he is unperturbed. His eyes are black with an insect's unseeing calm. He looks as if he nourished himself on honey and Levantine syrups that he sucks up through a sort of proboscis. What is his lost trade? Definitely of a servant class and something to do with the dead, though he is not an embalmer. Perhaps he stores something in his body, a substance to prolong life, of which he is periodically milked by his masters. He is specialized as an insect for the performance of some inconceivably vile function. I had been in Mexico several months. One day I went to see the lawyer I had hired to get working and residence papers for me. A shabby, middle-aged man was standing in front of the office. "He ain't come yet," the man said. I looked at the man. He was an old-time junkie, no doubt about it. And I knew he didn't have any doubts about me either. We stood around talking, and the lawyer came. The junkie was there to sell some religious medals. The lawyer had told him to bring a dozen up to his office. After I had seen the lawyer, I asked the junkie if he would join me for supper, and we went to a restaurant on San Juan Letran. The junkie asked me what my story was, and I told him. He flipped back his coat lapel and showed me a spike stuck in the underside of the lapel. "I've been on junk for 28 years, he said. "Do you want to score?" There is only one pusher in Mexico City, and that is Lupita. She has been in the business 20 years. Lupita got her start with 1 gram of junk and built up from there to a monopoly of the junk business in Mexico City. She weighed 300 pounds, so she started using junk to reduce. But only her face got thin, and the result is no improvement. Every month or so, she hires a new lover, gives him shirts and suits and wristwatches, and then packs him in when she has enough. Lupita pays off to operate wide open as if she were running a grocery store. She doesn't have to worry about stool pigeons because every law in the federal district knows that Lupita sells junk. She keeps outfits and glasses of alcohol so the junkies can fix in the joint and walk out clean. Lupita sells her stuff in papers. It is supposed to be heroin. Actually, it is pentapon cut with milk sugar and some other crap that looks like sand and remains undissolved in the spoon after you cook up. I started scoring for Lupita's papers through Ike, the old-time junkie I met in the lawyer's office. I'd been off junk 3 months at this time. It took me just 3 days to get back on. When my wife saw I was getting the habit again, she did something she had never done before. I was cooking up a shot 2 days after I connected with old Ike. My wife grabbed a spoon and threw the junk on the floor. I slapped her twice across the face, and she threw herself on the bed sobbing, then turned around and said to me, "Don't you want to do anything at all? You know how bored you get when you have a habit. It's like all the lights went out." "Oh, well, do what you want. I guess you have some stashed anyway." I did have some stashed. Lupita's papers cost 15 pesos each, about $2. They're half the strength of a $2 stateside cap. Ike told me she has to charge high because she pays off the law. So I asked Ike, "What about scripts?" He told me the croakers could only prescribe M in solution. The most they were allowed to prescribe in one script was 15 centigrams, or about 2.5 grains. I figured it would work out a lot cheaper than Lupita, so we started hitting the croakers. We located several who would write the script for 5 pesos, and 5 more would get it filled. Mexican croakers are not like stateside croakers. They never pull that professional man act on you. A croaker will write it all, will write without hearing a story. In Mexico City, there are so many doctors that a lot of them have a hard time making it. I know croakers who would starve to death if they didn't write morphine scripts. They don't have patient 1 unless you call junkies patients. I was keeping up Ike's habit as well as my own, and it ran into money. At first, we filled the scripts without too much trouble. But after a few weeks, the scripts had piled up in the drugstores that would fill M scripts, and they began packing in. It looked like we would be back with Lupita. One of the script-writing doctors suggested to Ike that he apply for a government permit. Ike explained to me that the Mexican government issued permits to hypes, allowing them a definite quantity of morphine per month at wholesale prices. The doctor would put in an application for Ike for 100 pesos. I said, "Go ahead and apply," and gave him the money. I did not expect the deal to go through, but it did. 10 days later, he had a government permit to buy 15 grams of morphine every month. I remember the first time he filled the permit. A whole box full of cubes of morphine, like a junkie's dream. I had never seen so much morphine before all at once. I put out the money and we split the stuff. 7 grains per month allowed me about 3 grains per day, which was more than I ever had in the States. So I was supplied with plenty of junk for a cost of $30 a month, as compared with about $300 a month in the U.S. Junk takes everything and gives nothing but insurance against junk sickness. Every now and then I took a good look at the deal I was giving myself and decided to take the cure. When you're getting plenty of junk, kicking looks easy. You say, I'm not getting any kick from the shots anymore, I might as well quit. But when you cut down into junk sickness, the picture looks different. One morning in April, I woke up a little sick. I lay there looking at shadows on the white plaster ceiling. I remembered a long time ago when I lay in bed beside my mother, watching lights from the street move across the ceiling and down the walls. I felt the sharp nostalgia of train whistles, piano music down a city street, burning leaves. A mild degree of junk sickness always brought me the magic of childhood. It never fails, I thought, just like a shot. I wonder if all junkies score for this wonderful stuff. I went into the bathroom to take a shot. I was a long time hitting a vein. The needle clogged twice. Blood ran down my arm. The junk spread through my body, an injection of death. The dream was gone. I looked down at the blood that ran from elbow to wrist. I felt a sudden pity for the violated veins and tissue. Tenderly, I wiped the blood off my arm. I'm going to quit, I said aloud. Then I started drinking. I had never been able to drink before when I was on the junk or junk sick. But eating hop is different from shooting the white stuff. You can mix hop and mush. At first, I started drinking at 5 in the afternoon. After a week, I started drinking at 8 in the morning. Stayed drunk all day and all night and woke up drunk the next morning. Every morning when I woke up, I washed down Benzedrine, Sanacine, and a piece of hop with black coffee and a shot of tequila. Then I lay back and closed my eyes and tried to piece together the night before and yesterday. Often, I drew a blank from noon on. You sometimes wake up from a dream and think, thank God I didn't really do that. Reconstructing a period of blackout, you think, my God, did I really do it? The line between saying and thinking is blurred. Did you say it or just think it? After 10 days of the cure, I had deteriorated shockingly. My clothes were spotted and stiff, and the drinks I had spilled all over myself. I never bathed. I had lost weight. My hands shook. I was always spilling things, knocking over chairs and falling down. But I seemed to have unlimited energy and a capacity for liquor I never had before. My emotions spilled out everywhere. I was uncontrollably sociable and would talk to anybody I could pin down. I forced distastefully intimate confidences on perfect strangers. Several times I made the crudest sexual propositions to people who had given no hint of reciprocity. I goes around every few days. I'm glad to see you getting off, Bill. May I fall down and be paralyzed if I don't mean it. But if you get too sick and start to puke, here's 5 centigrams of M. Ike took a severe view of my drinking. You're drinking, Bill. You're drinking and getting crazy. You look terrible. You look terrible in your face. Better you should go back to stuff than drink like this. I was in a cheap cantina off Dolores Street, Mexico City. I had been drinking for about 2 weeks. I was sitting in a booth with 3 Mexicans drinking tequila. The Mexicans were fairly well dressed. One of them spoke English. A middle-aged, heavy-set Mexican with a sad, sweet face sang songs and played the guitar. He was sitting at the end of a booth in a chair. I was glad the singing made conversation impossible. 5 cops came in. I figured I might get a shake, so I slipped the gun and holster out of my belt and dropped them under the table with a piece of hop I had stashed in a cigarette package. The cops had a quick beer and took off. When I reached under the table, my gun was gone, but the holster was there. I was sitting in another bar with a Mexican who spoke English. The singer and the other 2 Mexicans were gone. The place was suffused with a dim yellow light. A moldy-looking bullhead mounted on a plaque hung over the mahogany bar. Pictures of bullfighters, some autographed, decorated the walls. The word saloon was etched in the frosted glass swinging door. I found myself reading the word saloon over and over. I had the feeling of coming into the middle of a conversation. I inferred from the expression of the other man that I was in mid-sentence, but did not know what I had said or what I was going to say, or what the discussion was about. I thought we must be talking about the gun. I'm probably trying to buy it back. I noticed the man had the piece of hop in his hand and was turning it over. So you think I look like a junkie, he said. I looked at him. The man had a thin face with high cheekbones. The eyes were a gray-brown color, often seen in mixed Indian and European stock. He was wearing a light gray suit and a tie. His mouth was thin, twisted down at the corners. A junkie mouth for sure. There are people who look like junkies and aren't, just as some people look queer and aren't. It's a type that causes trouble. I'm going to call a cop, he said, starting for a phone attached to a support pillar. I jerked the telephone out of the man's hand and pushed him against the bar so hard he bounced off it. The man smiled at me. His teeth were covered with a brown film. He turned his back and called the bartender over and showed him the piece of hop. I walked out and got a cab. I remember going back to my apartment to get another gun, a heavy-caliber revolver. I was in a hysterical rage, though exactly why I cannot, in retrospect, understand. I got out of a taxi and walked down the street and into the bar. The man was leaning against the bar, his gray coat pulled tight over his thin back and shoulders. He turned an expressionless face to me. I said, "Walk outside ahead of me." "Why, Bill?" he asked. "Go on, walk." I flipped the heavy revolver out of my waistband, cocking it as I drew, and stuck the muzzle in the man's stomach. With my left hand, I took hold of the man's coat lapel and shoved him back against the bar. It did not occur to me until later that the man had used my correct first name and that the bartender probably knew it too. The man was perfectly relaxed, his face blank with controlled fear. I saw someone approaching from behind on my right side and half turned my head. The bartender was closing in with a cop. I turned around, irritated at the interruption. I shoved the gun in the cop's stomach. "Who asked you to put in your 2 cents?" I asked in English. I was not talking to a solid, three-dimensional cop. I was talking to the recurrent cop of my dreams, an irritating, nondescript, darkish man who would rush in when I was about to take a shot or go to bed with a boy. The bartender grabbed my arm, twisting it to one side out of the cop's stomach. The cop stolidly hauled out his battered .45 automatic, placing it firmly against my body. I could feel the coldness of the muzzle through my thin cotton shirt. The cop's stomach stuck out. He had not sucked it in or leaned forward. I relaxed my hold on the gun and felt it leave my hand. I half raised my hands, palm out, in a gesture of surrender. All right, I said, and then added, bueno. The cop put away his .45. The bartender was leaning against the bar, examining the gun. The man in the gray suit stood there without any expression at all. Está cargado, it's loaded, said the bartender, without looking up from the gun. I intended to say, of course, what good is an unloaded gun? But I did not say anything. The cop took me firmly by the arm. Vámonos, gringo, he said. I walked out with the cop. I felt limp and had difficulty controlling my legs. Once I stumbled and the cop steadied me. I was trying to convey the idea that while I had no money on my person, I could borrow some de amigos. My brain was numb. I mixed Spanish and English, and the word for borrow was hidden in some filing cabinet of the mind, cut off from my use by the mechanical barrier of alcohol-numbed connections. The cop shook his head. I was making an effort to reform the concept. Suddenly, the cop stopped walking. Andale, gringo, he said, giving me a slight push on the shoulder. The cop stood there for a minute, watching me as I walked on down the street. I waved. The cop did not respond. He turned and walked back the way he had come. I kept on drinking. Several days later, I passed out in the ship ahoy after drinking tequila for 8 hours steadily. Some friends carried me home. Next morning, I had the worst hangover of my life. I began vomiting at 10-minute intervals until I brought up green bile. Then old Ike was around. You gotta quit drinking, Bill. You're getting crazy. I had never been so sick. Nausea racked my body like a convulsion. Old Ike was holding me up as I vomited a few spoonfuls of bile into the toilet. He put an arm around my shoulder and hugged me and helped me back to bed. About 5 in the afternoon, I stopped vomiting and managed to keep a bottle of grape juice and a glass of milk down. It stinks like piss in here, I said. One of them cats must have pissed under the bed. Ike began sniffing around the bed. No, nothing there. He sniffed some more near the head of the bed where I was lying propped up on pillows. Bill, it's you smells like piss. Huh? I began smelling my hands with mounting horror as if I was discovering leprosy. Good Lord, I said, my stomach cold with fear. I got uremic poisoning. Ike, go out and get me a croaker. Okay, Bill, I'll get you one right away. And don't come back with one of them 5 peso script-writing bums. Okay, Bill. I lay there trying to control the fear. I did not know much about uremic poisoning. A woman I'd known slightly in Texas had died of it after drinking a bottle of beer every hour, night and day for 2 weeks. Rollins had told me about it. She swelled up and turned sort of black and went into convulsions and died. The whole house smelled like piss. I relaxed, trying to tune in on my viscera and find out what the score was. I did not feel death or indication of grave illness. I felt tired, battered, languid. I lay there with my eyes closed in the darkening room. Old Ike came in with the doctor and turned on the light. The doctor sniffed and smiled and nodded. He had a round, smiling Oriental face. He made a quick examination and asked if I could urinate. Then, turning to Ike, he asked if I was subject to fits. Ike spoke in his halting Spanish, looking for each word. Este señor huele muy malo y quiere saber por qué. This man smells very bad and he wants to know why. The doctor explained it was an incipient uremia, but the danger was now past. I would have to stop drinking for a month. The doctor picked up an empty tequila bottle. 1 more of these and you were dead. He was putting away his instruments. He wrote out a prescription for an anti-acid preparation to take every few hours, shook hands with me and Ike, and left. Next day I had the chucks and ate everything in sight. I stayed in bed 3 days. The metabolic setup of alcoholism had ceased operating. When I started drinking again, I drank normally and never before the late afternoon. I stayed off the junk. When I jumped bail and left the States, the heat on junk already looked like something new and special. Initial symptoms of nationwide hysteria were clear. Louisiana passed a law making it a crime to be a drug addict. Since no place or time is specified and the term addict is not clearly defined, no proof is necessary or even relevant under a law so formulated. No proof and consequently no trial. This is police state legislation penalizing a state of being. Other states were emulating Louisiana. I saw my chance of escaping conviction dwindle daily as the anti-junk feeling mounted to a paranoid obsession, like anti-Semitism under the Nazis. So I decided to jump bail and live permanently outside the United States. Refugee hipsters trickled down into Mexico. 6 months for needle marks under the vague addict law in California. 8 years for a dropper in Washington. 2 to 10 for selling in New York. A group of young hipsters drop by my place every day to smoke weed. No zoot suiters, the hipster has gone underground. I learned the new hipster vocabulary. Pot for weed, twisted for busted. Cool and all-purpose word indicating anything you like or any situation that is not hot with the law. Conversely, anything you don't like is uncool. From listening to these characters, I got a picture of the situation in the U.S. A state of complete chaos where you never know who is who or where you stand. Peyote is a new kick in the States. It isn't under the Harrison Act, and you can buy it from herb dealers through the mail. I never tried peyote, and I asked Johnny White if he could score for peyote in Mexico. He said yes, a herb dealer here sells it. He invited all of us to come to his place and eat peyote with him. You can come along if you like. I want to see if he has anything I can take back to the States and sell there. Why not take back peyote? Doesn't keep. It rots or dries up in a few days and loses its kick. We went to the herb dealer's house and he brought out a bowl of peyote, a grater, and a pot of tea. Peyote is a small cactus, and only the top part that appears above the ground is eaten. This is called a button. The buttons are prepared by peeling off the bark and fuzz and running the button through a grater until it looks like avocado salad. 4 buttons is the average dose for a beginner. We washed down the peyote with tea. I came near gagging on it several times. Finally, I got it all down and sat there waiting for something to happen. Peyote high is something like a benzodrine high. You can't sleep and your pupils are dilated. Everything looks like a peyote plant. I was driving in the car and Johnny said, "Look at the bank along the road. It looks like a peyote plant." I turned around to look and was thinking, what a damn silly idea. People can talk themselves into anything. But it did look like a peyote plant. Everything I saw looked like a peyote plant. Our faces swelled under the eyes and our lips got thicker through some glandular action of the drug. We actually looked like Indians. The others claimed they felt primitive and were laying around on the grass and acting the way they figured Indians act. I didn't feel any different from ordinary except high like on Benny. The young hipsters seemed lacking in energy and spontaneous enjoyment of life. The mention of pot or junk will galvanize them like a shot of coke. They jump around and say, "Too much. Man, let's pick up. Let's get loaded." But after a shot, they slump into a chair like a resigned baby waiting for life to bring the bottle again. I found that their interests were very limited. Bill Gaines threw in the towel and moved to Mexico. I met him at the airport. He was loaded on H and goofballs. His pants were spotted with blood where he had been fixing on the plane with a safety pin. You make a hole with a pin and put the dropper over, not in the hole, and the solution goes right in. With this method, you don't need a needle, but it takes an old-time junkie to make it work. You have to use exactly the right degree of pressure feeding in the solution. I tried it once and the junk squirted out to the side and I lost it all. But when Gaines made a hole in his flesh, the hole stayed open waiting for junk. Bill was an old-timer. He knew everybody in the business. He had an excellent reputation, and he could score as long as anyone sold junk. I figured the situation must be desperate when Bill packed in and left the States. "Sure, I can score," he told me, "but if I stay in the States, I'll wind up doing about 10 years. I took a shot with him, and the what happened to so-and-so routine set in. Old Bart died on the island. Louis the bellhop went wrong. Tony and Nick went wrong. Herman didn't make parole. The Gimp got 5 to 10. Marvin the waiter died from an overdose. What about Roy, I asked. Didn't you hear about him? He went wrong and hanged himself in the tombs. Roy had always taken an intolerant and puritanical view of pigeons. "I don't see how a pigeon can live with himself," he said to me once. I asked Bill about child addicts. He nodded and smiled a sly, gloating smile. "Yes, Lexington is full of young kids now." At this time, I was not on junk, but I was a long way from being clear in the event of an unforeseen shake. There was always some weed around, and people were using my place as a shooting gallery. I was taking chances and not making one centavo. I decided it was about time to move out from under and head south. When you give up junk, you give up a way of life. I've seen junkies kick and hit the lush and wind up dead in a few years. Suicide is frequent among ex-junkies. Why does a junkie quit junk of his own will? You never know the answer to that question. No conscious tabulation of the disadvantages and horrors of junk gives you the emotional drive to kick. The decision to quit junk is a cellular decision. And once you've decided to quit, you cannot go back to junk permanently any more than you could stay away from it before. Like a man who's been away a long time, you see things different when you return from junk. I read about a drug called yahe used by Indians in the headwaters of the Amazon. Yahe is supposed to increase telepathic sensitivity. A Colombian scientist isolated from yahe a drug he called telepathy. I know from my own experience that telepathy is a fact. I have no interest in proving telepathy or anything to anybody. But I do want usable knowledge of telepathy. What I look for in any relationship is contact on the nonverbal level of intuition and feeling. That is telepathic contact. Apparently, I'm not the only one interested in yahe. The Russians are using the drug in experiments on slave labor. They want to induce states of automatic obedience and literal thought control. The basic con. No build-up, no routine, just move in on someone's psyche and give orders. The deal is certain to backfire because telepathy is not in itself a one-way setup or a setup of sender and receiver at all. I decided to go down to Colombia and score for yahe. Bill Gaines is squared away with old Ike. My wife and I are separated. I'm ready to move on south and look for the uncut kick that opens out instead of narrowing down like junk. Kick is seeing things from a special angle. Kick is momentary freedom from the claims of the aging, cautious, nagging, frightened flesh. Maybe I will find in yahe what I was looking for in junk and weed and coke. Yahe may be the final fix.